we met each other at Lathy Middle
Yes, sir.
School, right? And we're partner teachers for a bit. Like you were my partner teacher for a bit, and then I think I got moved out or something like that. Like I moved back.
I was displaced. Yeah,
You
I was displaced. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you were displaced. Okay.
Yes.
From what I remember, we were partner teachers, and then I took another assignment. Like in the school, I was like
Mm-hmm.
this other thing. I don't even know. It was like an elective. I just taught electives or something like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of the name that took the man that took over my position. He was a young man, but he took over my spot as a math science teacher there. And then I
Yes.
went back. They brought me back
Yes.
because it was out of control. The class was out of control or something like that.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Was that how it went down? Or
Yeah, yeah. So the way that I remember is because it was my first year at Lathy, and I when I originally had signed up, they were like, "Oh yeah, you're going to be with the veteran teacher, Mr. Vergara," and I was like, "Okay, cool, wonderful." I had just come off of teaching a few years at a charter school, and then prior to that, a private school. So I was like, "Okay, my first crack here at LAUSD, I get a veteran teacher." I was like, "Hey, wonderful."
yeah,
And then come to find out, like 2 weeks, I think it was like a week or two prior to the start of the school year, they're like, "Oh, by the way, he's been given a new assignment
yeah,
for some kind of electives that had to deal with, I think it was like some form of like college readiness, social emotional type of classes. I think that you were given at
yeah,
that time." And they were like, "You're gonna get you're getting a new student fresh out of new teacher fresh
yeah.
out of the credential program from USC." And I was like, "Okay." Yeah, and he, bless his heart, he was
Bless
in
his
it for all the
heart.
right, yeah, he was in it for all the right reasons. But he did not have the experience yet to kind of maintain, the structure throughout the school year for that. And
Yes.
I think that's when they brought you in shortly thereafter.
So I remember I had these kids for all of sixth grade. I think it was all of sixth grade. I already had these kids, and we loop with these kids.
Yes.
So I was gonna loop with them in seventh grade, and I think I might have started the year or something like that. I can't remember, but I remember I take that college readiness class or whatever. I'm doing that elective thing, and then the kids are coming to me like, Mr. Vergara, it's just crazy. It's not
Hmm.
like how you used to have it. It's just wild over there. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, what's going on? And I remember I go over there and I talk to that young man. I'd be like, hey, you need any help? Like, how can I help you? And I don't know if whether he maybe it was an ego hit or I don't know. Or I don't know. He didn't want any help. I felt like I tell him, but it didn't seem like he was listening. You
No,
know?
a lot of it felt like he wanted to try to implement whatever he had just learned in the credential program.
Yeah,
Because he had just, and then I think he was still in a few classes just to kind of finish up. And in his mind, I remember also having the same conversation. I remember having this sensation of like in his mind, he wanted to try out some things on his own before
yeah,
taking any feedback.
yeah,
And I remember, any type of feedback we would give as far as like, how to deal with, some of the behaviors in that classroom, because that class was rough. It was a rough class.
oh yeah,
Uh, that class was a rough class, and so anytime you would try to give him any form of feedback, he sat there, kind of said, just kind of shook his head respectfully,
yeah.
but you knew it wasn't going to be implemented.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I remember like there was times where they pulled me out of that elective class to sit in that classroom to like, hey, let me help you out. And I would sit there and I would like these same kids that I had last year were kids that were just walking around and not paying attention, not doing any work and not listening and talking over the teacher. And I'm sitting in the back like, oh my God, like what's going on here? Like what's happening?
Hmm.
This is not when I was here, this is not how it was. And then I tried to step in, but I didn't want to step on his toes. Like I didn't want to like just take control of the classroom. So I'd observe, take some notes, be like, hey, this is what I saw, like if maybe you might want to try this. And like you said, he was real respectful. He like listened and nodded, but like nothing ever happened. And then I remember them pulling me out of that elective class because it was just ridiculous over there. And then for the whole rest of this, I think it was like halfway through the year or whatever, I was trying to get them back. Like, and that was
Hmm.
hard. It was
Yeah.
hard because they were so used to like, oh, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to. We could pull out our phone. We could do whatever we want. We could walk around. We could do whatever we want. There was no rules or structure.
Yeah.
And you're over here trying to say like trying to get us back and trying to get us to follow rules and do our work. No. And
Yeah.
I remember that year was rough.
Yeah, that year was rough, and not to say like the entire class was rough. Just like every other class, you have a good majority of students, who are trying their best and doing everything they can on a daily basis, and then you
Yeah.
have your handful who run amok, and
Yep.
the handful they ran with it, and everyone else just kind of followed suit.
Yeah.
And I think the demeanor of not just not just that class in the math and science, but in my class when I was teaching them, English and history, it really did change after you went back in the classroom because there was this sense of like, okay, there's this uniformity between both classes. Like
Yeah.
we cannot get away with anything, right?
Yeah.
So there was no longer this, we get a break in math and science and we get to kind of fool around.
Mhm.
But when we go to Mr. Perez's class, it's like, oh no, 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 like, we're, and not to say like I had them completely under control, but at the very least, they weren't running over me. They weren't getting up in
Yeah.
the middle of class, kind of running around. So it
Yeah.
was an interesting school year.
Yeah, and we had good communication. We talked to each other.
Yes, sir.
We were open to feedback, and you told me some things, I told you some things. You downloaded free movies on my computer, and I was
Yeah,
thankful. Do you remember that?
of course.
You
We
always
had
had
all the
like the
resources to
hookup.
share.
You
Yeah.
you always had the hookup. You were I remember you were good with electronics. Like I don't know, you knew how to pirate movies or something like that. It was like you remember that?
I took. It was a difficult time because we have a firewall that really doesn't allow a lot of the things. So, we found ways to kind of get whatever materials we needed for our students at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you explained that.
Yeah, I mean that's what it was.
I have this. I found my old computer, Danny. I found my old computer, and I have this file that says Mr. Perez's movies. I had this file. I was like, oh, Mr. President, is that like these old movies? You like some
Oh
movies you
man.
gave me. I was like, oh, okay, here they are. Here's the old movies, or whatever. But I remember you're pretty good handy with like all electronics. Like you were able to get my printer going. I didn't know how to get it on the Wi-Fi, and you're able to get that printer going. And are you still pretty handy?
Yeah, still do it. I think it's important to keep up with the times because our technology is constantly changing.
Yeah,
And especially when it comes to the districts such as LAUSD, with it being so large, sometimes you can't wait a day or two for ITD to come out and kind of
yeah,
fix things. So a lot of the things I actually learned to do in my time as a teacher's assistant within LAUSD.
hmm,
I would see the ITD what they were doing and be like, okay, like I can replicate that. And you
yeah,
kind of learn your way around computers. But yeah, I still, to this day, I still tinker with computers. During college, I used to build them just for fun, but
wow,
that's different. But now I really do, it becomes like a puzzle,
yeah,
right? It's like we have this issue, students, whether it's students not being able to log in, printers not working for teachers, anything of that nature. We just kind of use it as a puzzle and like, okay, like the brain starts kind of clicking. Okay, what can we do to kind of assist?
yeah. So, what's your take on phones in the classroom?
Uh,
What's your take on that? Because you're big on electronics and stuff like that. Like, what's your take on that?
you know, the thing about it is, I think we're in an era where the students had too much access
Yeah,
to technology. I think we're in an era where we have, and not just too much access, but too much, without visitation. It's not being parental, it's not being guided. It's free range for the
yeah,
most part. And whether parents put in parent blockers or parent apps and things like that, kiddos they're not dumb.
hmm,
They find ways. They're very smart. They were able to do it around a lot of the school Wi-Fi firewalls. They're able
yeah,
to find different ways because for them it becomes a challenge. The moment you, I feel for a lot of students, it's like the moment you tell them no, it's like watch
yeah,
me, right?
yeah,
You're gonna get a lot of students who are like, okay, you're gonna tell me no, watch me.
yeah,
So one, I think we have a lot of that. So a lot of students were just so accustomed to having free range to their devices, whether that was, during the pandemic with them, being virtual and having that device in front of them the entire time as a distraction, or even after the pandemic, in which you see a lot of students. I'll give you a perfect example. The last week of school, I took a phone away from a student,
Mm,
and that phone, I didn't touch it, left it on my desk, and I was in the middle of all these IEP meetings for the day. But we're talking about 9 o'clock during the day when they should be in school, and they are receiving Snapchats, they are
oh yeah,
receiving text messages, they are, and
yeah,
it's from a variety of people, everything from friends to family,
yeah,
and it just becomes this huge distraction where even the student was coming in at recess like, oh, did so and so message me? It's like, I can't. I'm not going to tell you that. Like,
yeah,
that device should be at home, or that device
yeah.
should be in your backpack. So
Yeah, it's extremely distracting, and then we expect them to focus in the classroom when
yeah.
all day long they're getting messages from their mom, from, like you said, family, from their friends, from social media. It's very distracting. Do you think that phones? Because I saw this article about LAUSD thinking about banning phones in the classroom. Do you think that's a good idea?
I'm interested to hear how the implementation is going to go.
Yeah,
That's for me where I'm definitely interested. I know there have been school sites, through their local school leadership, who pushed a, excuse me, they pushed a proposal where if a student was caught with their phone, the phone was taken away and it was held until Friday, and then the parents
yeah,
had to pick it up Friday, right? Which we've heard different variations of that form in different avenues. But I think this is the first time I've kind of ever really heard where the districts is attempting to put the foot down and say, like, a complete ban.
yeah.
But again, it's like, what does that mean? Is it, because we've had it in the handbook before where, no electronics on campus. But then
Hmm.
we've also been told as APs, or as administrators or teachers, it's like, oh, but they can have it in their backpack
Hmm.
as long as it's off, right?
Yeah.
So does this ban mean, they cannot bring it on campus at all? Or is it just the different variation of, oh, well, they can have it as long as it's off and in their backpack, or it's collected by, someone? But I'm very interested into how this is going to kind of come about.
I feel like implementation is everything. Like if you don't
Yeah.
do it correctly, then if you get mixed messages, like one person saying this, but then another person saying that, well, then it's out the door. Like it's like, well, who do I listen to? And I don't got one, path, one rule of how to do it. I got multiple people telling me what to do, and they're all different. Forget it. I'll just keep messing with my phone. I know when I was a dean, um we had a phone policy, and the good thing about our phone policy was we had monthly behavioral assemblies, like
Mm-hmm.
positive behavioral assemblies monthly. And so it was called like now academy assembly or something like that. And so every month the principal goes up, and then like the PSW goes up and talks about, like, I don't know, any whatever. And then the whoever comes up, they start. And then when I go up, I talk about tardiness, I talk about phones, I talk about all the things that deans talk about, uniform policy. And every month I talk about it, and I go over, this is the policy, and this is what happens if you break policy. And so our rule was, no electronics in the classroom, right? And there was a 5-3-1 policy where if we catch you with the phone, right, and it's given to me, like, or any administrator, right, it's given to me. One, you have a choice. 5 meaning we keep it for 5 days and then we give it back to you. 3 meaning you have to do 3 detentions, and then after 3 detentions we give it back to you. Or 1 meaning we call your parent, one phone call, we call your parent, and then they come pick it up or not, but we're not giving it back to them. We're not giving it back to the student until the parent
Mm-hmm.
comes and gets it.
Yeah.
So we sit them down and we're like, 5-3-1, what do you want to do? And then the kid will be like, man, don't call my mom, whatever. I'll just say I lost it. 5, keep it for 5 days. And then we're like, okay, we'll keep it. I'll put it in this drawer right here, 5 days. We still call parents, but 5 days. And I call parent, I'm like, hey, so and so was called the phone. Our policy is 5-3-1. He said 5 days. Are you okay with that? And mom would be like, yeah, of course. You should be using the phone. Cool. Um, and we'd let the student pick. And then if they use 5, well, they can't use 5 anymore. All you have is 3 or 1.
Mm-hmm.
So which one do you want? You want your mom to come pick it up, right? You should, or we're gonna call it, or three detentions, then we give it back to you. What are you gonna do? And that's what we did. And for the most part, it worked. It worked because of the behavioral assemblies, monthly behavioral assemblies. Everybody knew what the policy was. There were signs up that said 531, and everybody kind of knew. And then I had a pretty good relationship with everybody. So when I went over there to get the phones, they're like, "Ah, Mr. Vergara, you're not gonna keep for it." No, I'm not. 531. I can't break policy. Just that's just the policy. 531. You know it already. What is it gonna be? And they're like, "Oh, okay, I'll do this." And I'm like, "All right, cool." The kids got real savvy where they would bring burner phones, like fake burner phones. Like, all right, here's my phone. And it's like this beater phone, like this
Yeah,
old
yeah,
iPhone. And I got fooled a few times. I was like, all right. And then same kid got caught like a day later with a different phone. I'm like, all right, I see what you guys are doing here.
yeah,
But implementation is everything. That's everything. And because we
yeah,
had good implementation, it worked.
yeah, and not just implementation, but just consistency across.
That too.
I think if we have something that's consistent, that the students are understanding, that the parents understand, I think it's going to work well. Very much like you said in your example at the school side with that 531, it's like the students knew exactly what was expected.
Hmm.
I think what tends to happen, unfortunately, and I can only speak for experience from the elementary level, is at the elementary level I think we have a lot more teachers who are a little more lenient from time to time.
Yeah.
And if they see a phone, they're like, oh, no, 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 put it away. Like,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to use it. When, if we have something that's consistent, that first time that phone comes out, it's like, you know what, hand it over. We're going to call AP, we're going to call someone, whoever, come and get it. And then
Yeah.
here's the policy that's going to happen. And I feel that it needs to be that consistent, even at an elementary level, because these kiddos go to middle school and high school, right?
Hmm.
And our kiddos are getting, they're getting their phones earlier and earlier.
Yep.
And so it's not like it was back, 10 years ago, where the majority of students who had phones were in the middle school and high school. Right now, we have a lot of kids even in elementary with phones.
That's right.
So I think if we keep it as consistent throughout all three levels, I think it could be definitely something that's implemented. And like I said, just we do have a lot more I feel like elementary tends to have folks that are a little more lenient at all levels, right? Whether it's teachers, TAs, or administrators, who kind of see it and they want to give the kid a second chance.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if we had some kind of policy like that, like a 531, that's wonderful, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I think in that aspect, it also gives the power to the students. Like, they're the ones having to choose what their consequence is because they knew they messed up,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? It's not the adult.
And what I found out this kind of worked as well. The teachers were like using 531 to their advantage.
Mm,
They were like, okay, so the kid pulls it out, and teacher says, you know what, just put it away, just put it in your bag. And then they would say something like, just put it in your bag. I don't want to call Mr. Vergara. I don't want to call so and so. You know what's gonna happen? 531. You know what's gonna happen. Just put it away. And they're like, all right, miss, cool, I'll put it away. I don't want. And they made the admin look like a bad guys, which is great.
yeah,
You use the admin as the bad guys. Use the
exactly.
dean, use the admin. They let them be the bad guys. Teacher, you develop that relationship with the student. And if that worked, if that kind of like leverage worked for you, great. Use it. But then at the same time, you got to pull the trigger sometime as well to let them know like you will pull the trigger. That's the second time you brought that phone out. I'm just gonna make the call now, and they're gonna
Yeah,
come and get it. So
absolutely.
yeah.
And
So
it's unfortunate oftentimes that the teachers are the ones in the forefront having to make those decisions like that,
yes,
right? Because it becomes that tricky situation of, especially like you're saying, our teachers are the ones who develop some of the closer relationships with their students.
yes,
And so for them, they want to, not just develop it, but then continue it. And oftentimes with a lot of our students, especially our older students, fourth and fifth graders, you know, that first time you call, it's like a huge betrayal,
hmm,
right? And
hmm,
and you know, you can lose that trust in that student, or you can lose it. But I feel that it's got to be used in a way, like you said, make us the bad person,
yeah,
right? Even if that means like, hey, you know what, give a call, just be like, come inside. So and so's been using the phone. You take
yeah,
it away. I never called you for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Text
It's so that
message, like a text message. Yeah.
yeah, just or even during recess, like, hey, you know what, so and so's been using their phone. I gave them the opportunity. Why don't you go in and kind of check in, and that's fine for me. If I gotta become the bad person to save face for our teacher to continue to have that positive relationship with our students,
Yeah.
that's fine with me. I got no problem with that.
Yeah. What you just said earlier, teachers develop the closest relationships with the students. They do. They definitely do develop the closest relationships. If done right, they are the ones that the kids connect with the most.
Yeah,
And I agree with you. We are the bad guys most of the time.
hmm
We have to say set like here's this is school policy. Burgos, this is the line and you can't cross it. And if you cross it, this is gonna happen. We do this with the kids, we do it with the teacher, we do it with the staff, we do it with everybody, we do it with parents. And you know, that's just the role of an administrator. You have to hold that hard line and people will criticize you about it. And I feel like it's how you deliver it. It's your delivery. I feel like if as an admin, if you deliver that hard line in a correct way, it's not that bad.
yeah,
But I've seen that hard line be abused and the admin take it, they take advantage, they're rude, I don't know. And
yeah.
it's just it's the delivery of it. That's what
Yeah,
I feel.
the thing is, as administrators, we should be able to discipline with compassion. You can
Yeah.
always do. At the end of the day, they're kids.
Hmm.
Like they're kids, right? They're they are not fully developed in any way, shape, or form.
No.
And I think too often, and I was guilty of this as well. Starting off early on, both as a teacher and then also as an administrator, right? You take things personal,
Yeah.
and you kind of hold on to it, and you hold it as a grudge, and then you got to remind yourself, look, at the end of the day, these are kids, they're students. Some of them are just trying to make it through the day and survive. Like that's their goal, make it through the day.
Hmm.
And there's got to be room for some form of compassion for you from you as the adult in a safe space such as a school.
Hmm.
So when you lead as an administrator with that heart, like granted, it's not always going to be perfect.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of practice. It's going to take a lot of apologies because it does happen, right? We are humans. We sometimes can lead with our emotions. We want things to be run a certain way, and we have certain expectations, not just from our students, but also from our teachers and even from ourselves.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like we just got to allow ourselves as administrators to have that room for them, because otherwise, what do we become in the equation of a school, right?
Yeah.
If we are not that person to both, we should become the firewall to kind of help the students continue their relationship with their teacher,
Hmm.
but also to have the student have their relationship with their school community, because in the end,
Yeah.
that's what we are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Can you walk me through a situation where you had to deal with a student with a difficult behavior? Like, let's say a student and let's just say a kid in the classroom is getting out of their seat and it's that kid is making the classroom environment a dangerous place. Let's say they're making and the teacher has to call admin because safety is involved. Let's say a student just threw a pencil sharpener across the room, is banging the door, kicking the door with his foot, and disrupting the learning. Everything's going on,
Yeah.
and you have to go in there. And let's just add this: the student doesn't want to leave
Ah.
because that happens too.
It's what's interesting is as soon as you're rattling off all these different things, I'm thinking of all the 5, 6 kiddos I kind of dealt with
Yeah.
throughout the years, right? But at the same time, truth be told, is like even as an administrator, like every situation has a unique uh, um, approach,
Yep.
right? So I'll give you a perfect example. I had one student who, they were in a gen ed classroom with a one-on-one for behavior, but oftentimes even the one-on-one struggled because the student would, from time to time get a little physical with other students, or start to kick and things like that. And what would tend to work with this student was firm, direct, like one step directions,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's not always going to work. But aside from that student, I think the first thing you want to be able to do is before you even go in there is assess the situation, find out, okay, if I walk into the classroom, is the danger enough where I need to evacuate everyone and leave the student in here? Or will I need to get down to the level of the student, have the conversation, and find some kind of way to negotiate them out of there, right? Ideally, the way that I've kind of dealt with it, especially with this student who does not want to leave, I'll ask the teacher, like, you know what, can you just take your kids out for PE for a moment? Because oftentimes, what I have seen with students who refuse to leave is either A, attention, or B, there's a student in there that's triggering them.
Yeah.
And that other student just going to continue to elevate the situation. Or
Yeah.
sometimes the teacher, whether, unfortunately, with whatever it could be. And so, if especially if it's a student not wanting to leave, I'll ask the teacher, you know what, can you just take your kids out for PE just for a little bit? Um, I'll sit and I'll talk to the student, and we'll start to have the conversation of, you know what, you have broken some classroom rules. You are going to have some consequences, but we also need you to get you to a safe space before and have some kind of conversation. And that's the conversation you have, right?
Mm.
You have that conversation of, you hear their concerns, and again, leading with compassion, having that understanding. It can be anything from, a student not having breakfast in the morning and they're hungry. So like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to feed you. You're going to eat. We're going to go sit in my office. We're going to have a reflection sheet for some work. Sorry, that's going to give you something extra to edit there.
Usually, I just I cut out the begin a little bit of the beginning and a little bit of the end. And I just let it go,
Yeah,
But
plow through. I
but
know. I had no idea what that was about. Yeah, but
but you were
apparently not.
saying though, you bring the kid in, you're having a conversation, you get them to talk with their parents.
Yeah, and at the end of it, there's always going to be some form of consequence. Like
Yeah,
there has to
there
be,
has to
right?
be.
There has to be. Whether it's a reflection sheet, whether it's the student, having to apologize, whether it's the student explaining to the parents what happened. There's a variety of different consequences that are not necessarily punitive,
Mm,
right? But there are learning. The thing is, like for me, I use consequences as learning experiences, as what they should be.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, our students are there to learn how to navigate life and learn how to navigate different situations.
yeah,
And if we as adults don't provide them the grace and the opportunity to um, learn from experiences, and all we do is take away recess or bench
hmm,
them and things like that, like what are they learning?
hmm,
What are they learning in that situation that's going to be useful for them as adults?
yeah, yeah. That's about right on for me. Like I think I know my 10 to 15 kids or whatever that really have all of my attention. I know who they
Mhm.
are, and I know I always try to build a relationship with these guys. Everywhere I go, I'm just trying to connect with them, connect with them, connect with them because somebody has to connect in a positive way with these guys. And I'll
Yeah.
catch them in the morning and I'll try to connect with them when the day's fresh and nobody's in trouble, right? But I have a
Yep.
good idea of who is who and what they do. And so, when I get that call, it's like, all right, I know who it is. I have a pretty good relationship with this person. Let's see if I can get them out of the classroom because sometimes they don't want to leave. And I'm in there and I'm walking up slowly and calmly and taking deep breaths and clearing my mind. And I get up there and, um, you know, I I see what's going on. I assess situation. Okay, everybody looks safe. I'm like, okay, I'm here. Everybody's safe. And I kind of just sit next to the student. I don't even say anything. I just kind of sit next to the student. And they're just sitting there like tapping the desk or something. I'm just sit there and I just wait for I don't know, a couple minutes. Just wait a couple
Mhm.
minutes, and then I'm like, hey, can we talk? And they're like, no. And I'm like, hey, can we just go for a walk? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay. So then I'll wait a little bit because I know they're not in the right state. They're not in the right state of mind right now. If we're
Yep.
outside and we're playing, they'll be fine. It'll be not a problem. But right now, they're not ready. So I'll wait another, as long as everybody's safe, I'm waiting another 4 or 5 minutes. Then I'll ask them again. Look, I need you to come and step outside with me right now so we could, assess the situation. What you're doing right here is not safe. And I'm all about safety. I need you to be safe. I need the kids in this classroom to be safe. And I need the teacher to be safe. So, because of safety reasons, right, we're going to have to leave and we're going to have to talk. I go, and we don't even have to talk. We just could walk, or you could just sit in my office. We don't have to talk. Just calm down. And then they might say no again. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I said, my next move now is I'm going to call your parent and I'm going to invite them to come in here. And you're going to explain to them that you refuse to leave the classroom, right? And I'm going to tell your parent that I was going to call you, and then you still refused. You still refused when I said, I'm going to call your mom. And you're like, I don't care. Go ahead. I'm going to tell that. So what exactly do you want me to tell your mom when I call her? What exactly do you want me to tell your dad when I call her? That you just said no, that you don't care that and then all of a sudden they are like, and then I'll say something like, I'm going to walk out now.
Hmm.
You can follow me or not. I'm still going to make that phone call and then I'm going to come back up here again. And then as I walk out the door, and I've done it, I've called. And because I've called and I've invited parents to come, they know like Mr. Vergara's not playing. He's gonna do it. I've seen this happen before. And so they're like, they'll follow me out. And we go downstairs and I don't even press them. It's like you need to regulate your emotions. You're not ready to talk. And so sit down, calm down. And then after a certain amount of time, like, are you good? You ready? And we walk through the whole situation. And I try to keep it safe as well. Like, I'm like, tell me what happened. And then they tell me what happened. And I say something like, I'm still going to have to call your parent, right? They're like, yeah, yeah, I know. And I'll say something like, this is exactly what I'm going to tell your parent. And I tell them. And it's like exactly what was happening. And then I say, is that right? Is that what happened? They're like, yeah, that's what happened. Okay, so that's what I'm going to tell them. Get on the phone, tell them exactly that. I like your idea to give the kid the phone. Like, hey, here,
Yeah,
tell them
yeah.
what's going on. I like
No,
that idea.
no.
I've never done it before, but I'm probably going to use it. And I tell them exactly right in front of the kid,
Hmm.
this is what happened. This is what's going on. And I just want to let you know that we're having a conversation right now with your son or daughter. And we're going to work through this problem. But when the child gets home, I need you to have this same conversation. And if you have any further questions, you're more than welcome to come and talk to me. You come in and talk to me anytime you want. They're like, all right, Mr. Vergara. And so we talk to a situation. We ask about what harm did you create? How do you repair that harm? And then there's consequences for what you do. So what are we going to do? You tell me what we're going to do for that, right? You disrupted everybody's learning. What should you do? And so we come up with some sort of fair consequence, and it's all
Hmm.
about the learning. You're right, it's all about the learning. It doesn't have to always be it doesn't have to be a punitive measures all the time. Like,
No.
sometimes I'll do it. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, you're gonna follow me at recess time. You're gonna shadow me at recess time. You're not gonna be able to walk around with your friends. You're gonna shadow me at recess time. You're still gonna be outside. We're still gonna walk around, but you just can't have free range of every.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Especially when it comes to safety out in the yard. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
You shadow me or you become a play leader.
Yes, or you could have recess and lunch with the kindergarten right now because we have a first recess and a second. So you
Yeah,
could go to first recess, enjoy your outside, but you're not gonna be with your friends.
yeah,
Um, and so that's kind of like how I handle those situations. So
yeah. I like the idea of walking in and not saying anything.
yeah,
I think that's been useful in certain situations. Not every and again, like not everything's going to warrant a class being moved out, but if it's a safety concern, that's definitely the move. Just want to make sure every student is feeling safe in the classroom.
yeah. How did you get into education? How did you get like where did you always want to be an educator?
No,
I
no,
love it.
no,
No,
I
no,
didn't.
not at all.
No, not at all. No, I, I guess in a way it was kind of natural, but I guess I kind of fought it. I'm the oldest in my family, right? I'm the oldest kid, and so I was always taking care of the
Mm,
young ones, right? When you're in a Mexican family household and you're the oldest, and I was also the oldest grandson, so it's like you're taking care of not just
yeah.
yourself but all the other cousins, right? And growing up, my aunt and uncle. they were teachers. They actually just retired this year, 33 and 32 years with the district.
Wow.
And they were the ones who would tell me, hey, you know what, you'd be a good teacher. No, 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 no. Just kind of brush it
Mm,
off to the side, right? No, 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 no. But every job that I kind of, for the most part, every job that I kind of went into, I was always working with kids, whether it was summer camp counseling, becoming a TA. And it was when I became a TA that I was like, you know what, I like this. This is a good feeling.
yeah.
And then when I was in college, I was a Chicano studies major. And when it became to having the discussions revolving around social justice, it's very much connected with education. And so for me, I started to have this idea of like, you know what, becoming a brown male educator was even more important because growing up, I never saw that. Right, growing
Mm-hmm.
up, all of my teachers in a brown neighborhood of Boyle Heights, for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, were all white and female.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, um, and so like I just remember telling myself, it's like I probably I did not see a male teacher till late in middle school, and then I
Yeah.
probably did not see a person of color, again till late in middle school, maybe even high school for some,
Yeah.
and so that to me became that driving force. And interesting enough, my wife's a teacher, my in-laws are teachers. So in the end, in my family and extended family, we have close to 16 teachers.
Wow.
There are
Wow.
16 educators.
It's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
Congrats.
yeah.
Congrats.
So I always make the joke like, our family reunions become a PD.
Yep.
But you know, uh, but it's definitely become a passion over the years. It kind of grew more into that, just and especially revolving around like I was mentioning, this whole social justice aspect of it. So that's why for me,
Hmm.
even as an administrator, I'm looking at things through a very different lens of
Yeah.
how can I provide opportunities for my students to improve themselves and improve their families' lives, to
Yeah.
become better members of society.
Yeah. And that's a whole different way to look at things.
Yeah.
How do you improve their lives, their families' lives, and how could they contribute to their community? That's a whole different way to look at things, and you treat them differently because you look through that lens, I feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, at the end of the day, is like these are going to be the adults that are going to be taking care of myself and my
Hmm.
colleagues as we get older, right? They're family members, they're elders, so we got to find a way to integrate them into the community in a positive way. We got
That's
to
right.
we need to provide opportunities where they're having positive experiences with adults, and in my instance, with a male figure of color, right?
Yeah.
I want them to have positive experiences. I want them to see that there's going to be a variety of people around them who's going to be there for them, not just mom
Yeah.
and dad. Like, so if we're unable to provide those situations for these students, we're going to have, communities that struggle. We're going to have students who are incredibly individualistic and don't look around their community and ask themselves, what can I do to make my community better? What can I
Hmm.
do to uplift my neighbor? What can I do to uplift myself, my family?
Hmm.
And it does, and again, it doesn't have to be financial. It doesn't have to be societal and like moving up a class. It could be something as simple as having a kid come up to you and be like, hey, you know what, Mr. Perez, I want to start a recycling program. Cool. How can I help you? Right.
Hmm.
Hey, Mr. Perez, I really want to do a fundraiser, or I want to do a canned food drive for the unhoused. Absolutely. What can
Hmm.
I do to help support that? So I really want to ingrain that in the students because I want them to look at communities the way I look at communities, right? Our communities should be uplifting each other. They should be helping each other out. There's too much division. We try to unite a variety of different ways as we can through whatever social justice lens that the kids are wearing. And so I think it's a very important aspect to provide them as much opportunities to do so.
Yeah. And so you're a classroom teacher, and then when do you decide to leave the classroom? You when
Um,
does that happen?
I was in my, I think it was like my eighth or ninth year of teaching, and I, I'm not, I'm not going to say that I was bored, but I got comfortable. And the
Yeah,
problem with me is I know myself. The moment I get comfortable, I get lazy, right?
yeah.
And so I looked at myself and I said, okay, how can I find a way to reach out to more students, right? Because when you're in the classroom, you really focus on the students in your class. And
Hmm.
as you make your way around your school, you try to touch base with other students, other classes. Um, but in the end, like your main focus are, your 30, 35, or in my case, I had 38 students my last year in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so that's your focus. And there became a time when I said, you know what, how can I reach more students? And so I applied to become a Title III coach. And that was my first out of the classroom experience, was assisting other teachers, with English learner instruction.
Hmm.
Because again, another underrepresented community that I really wanted to focus and to help other teachers to develop their own skills and how to teach these students, because they are a different breed in themselves, and
Hmm.
how we should focus and really teach these students. So, and again, I ran that with a very thoughtful lens, and from there, seeing all the different classrooms, that's where the idea of, like, you know what, I think I can be an administrator. Like, I think I can look at an administrator side of it and provide the support that teachers need in order to thrive in their own classrooms.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you applied, and what year did you become administrator?
I became an administrator October of 2021. So I just finished. I mean, this is
Recently.
technically third. Yeah, recently. This is the third year that I just
S-
finished. Um,
Me and you are the same, pretty much.
yeah,
We're pretty much the same.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because I started that year,
mhm,
but at the beginning of the year, I didn't start in October. I started, at the start of the year, July or
correct.
something like July 29th or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's and here we are as administrators,
Yeah. I
years
mean,
down the line when we used to work together 1 year at John Lathy Middle School.
we had, it was a good year. That was a good. I will say that was one of the years I learned. I learned a lot from you when it came down to handling, not so much. I don't want to say handling, but just kind
Yeah,
of dealing with situations when the social emotional lens with our students. Because I know
yeah,
you had been in that community for a lot longer,
yeah,
and the Lakey's in a rough community, and it's a different type, form of community, different form of migration community coming in. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot that year, really, and I think it's a lot of the tools that I learned that year I still kind of use today.
that's good. That's good. I hear a lot of frustration from teachers, and it's frustration in general in education. There's a lot of frustration. Let's just say in education, not
Yeah,
just teachers. Everybody's frustrated. Admin are frustrated.
correct.
In our position that we have, people got cut this year. There's a lot of people that got cut this year. So a lot of people got moved around. When I don't know if you have the same assignment, but I have a different assignment this year. They
Yeah,
moved me, and so
I'm being moved next year. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of frustration. Teachers are saying that kids are out of control, that they're not following directions, their behavior is out of control, and then they don't get support, and then they leave the classroom, something like that.
yeah.
What do you say to that?
I feel like during the pandemic we had this greater understanding from a lot of the parents of what it became to be a teacher, and then somewhere down the line there was this huge pendulum shift. Um, and I feel that there's a huge disconnect right now between the home and school.
Mm,
And not to say this is the parents' fault, because let's be honest, a lot of the parents of our students have multiple jobs. They're working more in order to make ends meet, and so that becomes a struggle.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, what has begun to happen is a lot of finger pointing from all parties, right? Teachers are saying this to students. Students are saying it's the teachers. Teachers are saying it's the parents. Parents are saying it's the teachers. Administrators saying it's the teachers. Like there's a lot of
Mhm.
finger pointing in every which way direction, and there's no hope. There's no cohesiveness, and that's the struggle, right? How do we create that cohesiveness? How do we create
Yes.
that community? I'm a huge proponent of community schools. I'm a huge proponent of having parents involved, having teachers involved, as much as you can within the community, being a part of those community events, because the more that you can build that community within that school site, um, the better that these schools can thrive. Unfortunately, like we were talking about in our position, we get moved. So the moment we build that community,
God.
us as administrators, right, we get pushed, we get pulled away. And
Yes.
I've seen it happen in the past. Like when I was a TA, I was at Trinity Elementary. We had a wonderful principal. She turned that school around. District decided we want you to do the same thing at another school site, and they pulled her.
Hmm.
And that school did not recuperate. Right,
Yeah.
that school struggled. I shouldn't say they didn't recuperate, but they struggled. Right, they could not replicate what was already there,
Yeah.
because what ends up happening is once you built that community, when you move pieces from it, it becomes a struggle,
Hmm.
because it's a community due to all the pieces that are all around it.
Yes.
And I think that's what we need more of within our schools, is this sense of community. And what is that going to take? Well, obviously, we know it's going to take more money on the part of the district to kind of help out to put these community events together.
Hmm.
Um, you know, more time to allow our teachers to create these events, right? Again, the money to pay our teachers to be there. The money to provide access to our parents to be there. It's just a lot. There's a lot going on, but I have seen, especially at the school site that I was at last year. There's great opportunity in providing those community events,
Yeah.
because when you see that the parents come out and you see that the kids are involved, um, they start to get a sense of pride of where they're from, of
Yeah.
that school site. And I think if we can push back to that, I think we can definitely see a possible shift in education.
Hmm.
Even whether it's education in that school site or as a whole, but at the very least, as parents, as teachers, as administrators, we can only control whatever happens behind those closed doors at our school site.
Yeah. Like it's sad that I'm leaving the school that I was there for 3 years. I built so many good relationships with them. I was there 5 days a week, built so many good relationships. And it was really me and the principal that ran everything. It was just two of us. There was
Mm-hmm.
only two full-time out of the class, admin, and then we had a part-time psych, a one-day PSW, something like that. We did not have a coordinator last year, so um, it was just us two. But we ran the school, and it was good. And we built good relations with the parents, with the teachers, with the students. She's retiring, so she's
Mm.
gonna leave. She's retiring. They pulled me, so though the admin are gone, they're gonna hire a new principal. There's a new AP going in there. There's a new coordinator being hired. So there's just all new faces next year,
Correct.
and that's rough. That's
It
that's
is.
a tough thing, and all the things that we built, all the things that we established. Hopefully, the ball could continue to roll and things are good, but it's just sad that that's kind of what happens.
Yeah,
So
and the unfortunate thing, like you said, is like hopefully the ball continues to roll, but um, the unfortunate thing that can happen is everyone wants to put their own stamp on certain things,
yeah.
right? But the hope is, again, like the stamp that a person is trying to put onto a community is what the community needs,
Hmm.
not what the individual or the personal needs, right?
Yeah.
And that's always the hope. And whether we, I mean, as administrators, that's all we can control, right? All we can control is what we put out there, what we try to bring as far as the support for our students and for our staff, and that support that we provide to parents. So, I'm again, I was at the school that I was at last year was the last 2 years, and it's a similar situation. The principal, she's staying, but they're pulling me, and there were a lot of teachers that I did not expect, who were saddened by that, who genuinely were looking at me like, you will be missed. And
Yeah.
I did not expect that because again, I personally did not build a bond with them, but they saw what I did for the community, and that's the part that, like, that's the part that's going to be missed
Yeah.
at that school site.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. We're going to come toward the end of the podcast right here. There are some teachers that want to be assistant principals,
Yeah.
right? There are some teachers who want to be assistant principals. What kind of advice would you give to a teacher who is thinking about leaving the classroom and thinking about joining the dark side, like they say?
Well, I will say, number one, don't think of it as a dark side.
That's
Like, I know
right.
it's difficult to think of that, but don't think of it as a dark side, because we're another cog in the machine. So don't think of it as that way. But I would definitely say, number one, if you are a teacher looking to join the administration, number one, really get an idea of what it means to run the school on all levels. And I don't just mean the front office, I mean custodial, I mean everything. Like, have an idea of what it takes. And that could be something as just building relationships with, the folks that you work with. Get to
Yeah.
know your plant manager, get to know the cafeteria manager,
Yeah.
get to know your, PTO or PTA president. Like, get to know all the parties that are involved that help run the school, and just kind of get to know what they do on a day-to-day basis. Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes behind the scenes of a school.
Yeah.
Um, I would also say that if you're looking to become an administrator, um, I would definitely work on understanding truly understand yourself as an educator. And I say that in the sense of, when you become an administrator, you know, you're going to be looked at as someone who's going to know curriculum, someone who's going to know behavior, who's going to know the structures of all of that, and get to know as much as you can. Is it okay to say, I don't know, but let me look that up for you? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But I think you should have some idea of what all of those systems are,
Yeah.
in that. And finally, I would say the last piece of advice for anyone is, be patient with it. If it's this truly something that you really want, don't rush into it. Don't rush into it, because it can cause you to make some mistakes, which we're all going to make. Um, but be patient with it, in knowing that it's, you're okay letting go of the classroom.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks tend to struggle with that, but be okay letting go of the classroom, and knowing that a lot of the work that you're going to do is going to be solitary.
Hmm. Even eating lunch. Even
Yeah,
eating
even
lunch.
eating lunch, a lot of the work that you're going to do is going to be solitary, and be
That's
okay with
right.
that.
Yeah.
So once you're comfortable with that idea, definitely jump into it.
Yeah. Well, Danny, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We were trying to touch base. I know you guys sick and it was like things
Yeah.
happened, but we made it happen. We made it
Yes, sir.
happen. We got this. We had a glitch in our podcast,
Yeah.
today. But we'll see what happens. I'll take a look at the video and I'll clip it together somehow. But thank you so much for coming out and sharing your wisdom and spending time here, sharing your advice to those that watch the podcast.
Definitely, John. My pleasure. And you know what? I just want to say kudos to you, and I appreciate you what you do in this little podcast. It is something that I feel a lot of educators should definitely tune into. Lots
Yeah.
of little tidbits from everyone who's been on, who has definitely been helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, John.